What if a box of forgotten metal plates could tell the story of a book published nearly a century ago? The artist who drew the pictures, the people who made the pages, and the woman who kept them safe for 60 years. In 2025, among the belongings of Eileen B. Holton, a woman who had lived a quiet life in the Villages, Florida, her executor found a set of 9 heavy copper plates. Each one was mounted on a block of metal and wood. Some carried lines of text, mirror reversed and nearly impossible to read. Others bore intricate illustrations, medieval knights, castle feasts, kneeling figures, all carved in reverse into gleaming copper. They were printing plates, letterpress printing plates, and every one of them came from the same book. Before modern offset printing, every page of every book began as a plate like these. The text or illustration was photographically transferred onto a copper surface, then acid etched to leave the image raised above the background. Ink the raised surface, press paper against it, and you get a printed page. Copper was the best material for this. It etches more evenly than zinc, holds finer detail, and lasts longer under the pressure of the press. Each plate had to be mounted on a block to reach exactly 918 thousandths of an inch, a measurement called type high. Too tall or too short by even a fraction, and the print would be uneven. These 9 plates were the tools of mass production, and they came from one of the most enduring novels in the English language, Ivanhoe. Published in 1819 by Sir Walter Scott, it was an instant sensation, and it has never gone out of print. Set in 12th century England during the reign of Richard the Lionheart, it tells the story of Wilfred of Ivanhoe, a young Saxon knight disinherited by his father for following the Norman king to the Crusades. When he returns home in disguise, he finds England torn between Saxons and Normans, his beloved Rowena promised to another man, and a conspiracy to keep King Richard from reclaiming his throne. It's a story of tournaments and sieges, of loyalty and betrayal, of Robin Hood, who actually appears as a character, and of Rebecca, the Jewish healer whose courage and dignity make her the moral heart of the novel. In 1936, Harcourt Brace and Company published a school edition of Ivanhoe, abridged and edited by Lucille and Hal Waldo, a husband and wife team of educators from Sacramento. They cut Scott's dense prose from over 500 pages down to 227, making it accessible to junior high school students across America. But here's the dating clue hidden in the plate. The publisher name reads Harcourt Brace and World Incorporated, a name the company used only from 1960 to 1970. Before that, it was just Harcourt Brace and Company. After 1970, it became Harcourt Brace Jovanovich. So while the book's copyright is 1936, these particular plates were made for a printing sometime in the 1960s. The illustrations were created by Decie Merwin, born Emma Martine Merwin in 1894 in Middlesbrough, Kentucky. She studied art at the New School of Design in Boston, then moved to New York City in 1925 to make her name as an illustrator. In 1934, she married Jack Beckdolt, a science fiction and adventure writer. A trip to England inspired a love of horses that would shape the rest of her career. Over 3 decades, Merwin illustrated at least 68 books, fairy tales, adventure stories, horse novels. She's not a household name like N.C. Wyeth or Maxfield Parrish, but among vintage children's book collectors and horse book enthusiasts, her work still has a devoted following. Having the actual copper plates from her illustrations is considerably rarer than owning a copy of the book. Now, let's walk through all 9 plates in the order they appear in the book and see what each one would have printed. The title page, Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Below that, the editor's names, Decie Merwin's credit as illustrator, and the publisher, Harcourt Brace and World. This is the front door to the book. Every copy printed from this plate opened the same way. A text page from the early chapters. Cedric the Saxon hosts a feast at his manor Rotherwood. The passage describes the spread: swine's flesh, fowl, deer, great loaves of bread. Then the major domo raises his wand and calls out, "Forbear! Place for the Lady Rowena." Notice the rectangular gap in the middle of the plate. That's where a separate illustration block would be inset during printing. And here is the illustration that went with that text. All stood up to receive the Lady Rowena. Decie Merwin drew a great medieval hall, castle battlements above, a long feast table, hounds sprawled in the foreground, and Rowena entering to the acknowledgement of the room. This plate would have been inset right into that gap on the previous page. This text page covers two of the novel's most intense sequences: the tournament at Ashby, where Ivanhoe faces the fearsome Templar knight Boy Gilbert, and later, the siege of Torquilstone, where the wounded Ivanhoe lies helpless, while Rebecca narrates the battle raging outside their window. One of the most emotionally charged scenes in the novel. Rebecca, kneeling, kissed the hem of the Lady Rowena's garment. Rebecca, the Jewish healer who saved Ivanhoe's life and arguably loves him, bids farewell to Rowena before leaving England forever. It's a scene about grace, sacrifice, and the boundaries of the world these characters inhabit. The Saxon cavalcade is ambushed. Cedric and Athelstane ride into a narrow defile, a brook crossing overgrown with dwarf willows, and the cry goes up, "A white dragon! St. George for merry England!" Both lords are captured. Cedric's javelin pins a man to an oak tree before he himself is disarmed by a branch overhead. Rebecca tends to the wounded Ivanhoe in one of the novel's quietest and most intimate scenes. Merwin captures a medieval interior, arched stone, gathered figures, and the private bond between healer and knight. It's a scene that says everything about Rebecca's character without a word of dialogue. The most dramatic plate in the collection, the Black Knight, who is secretly King Richard the Lionheart, leads the assault on Torquilstone Castle. A mounted knight in full armor charges through a battlefield of soldiers and smoke. Rebecca, watching from her window, describes it to Ivanhoe. His black plume floats abroad over the melee, like a raven over the field of the slain. This is the centerpiece of Merwin's illustrations, and arguably the finest plate in this set. The final plate, at the trial by combat for Rebecca's life, a stranger knight arrives and demands to fight Boys Gilbert. Asked for his name, he raises his helmet. "My name is better known, my lineage more pure, malvoisin than thine own. I am Wilfred of Ivanhoe," the climactic reveal of the entire novel, preserved in copper. How did these plates end up in a box in Florida? Eileen B. Holton, born Eileen Bender in 1941, worked at Harcourt Brace's education division under her maiden name. Whether she worked in production, editorial, or administration, we may never know. Mid-level publishing employees from the 1960s rarely left a digital footprint. But when this edition of Ivanhoe went out of print and the plates were headed for the scrap heap, someone kept them. Through moves and marriages, through a career and a retirement to the Villages, Florida, for 60 years, Eileen kept these 9 copper plates. In dollar terms, the 4 illustration plates are worth $15 to $75 each. They have real decorative appeal. The title page, 10 to 40. The text plates, 5 to 15 each. Total realistic value, $75 to $250, but their real value is harder to price. These are original production artifacts from mid-century American publishing. Physical links between a 200-year-old novel, a forgotten illustrator, and the school children who turned these pages in the 1960s. You could display them as industrial art, mounted in shadow boxes or floating frames. The copper patina is beautiful on its own. You could have a letterpress studio pull actual prints from the plates, creating art the same way the original book pages were made. You could donate them to a printing museum where they'd join the historical record, or you could sell them to a collector who will treasure what they represent. Each option honors the plates differently, but the option that matters most is this. Tell their story, because without the story, they're just metal. Every antique has a story, but most of the time that story is lost. The names worn away, the connections broken, the reasons forgotten. These plates are different. We can trace their journey. From Decie Merwin's studio in the 1930s, through Harcourt Brace's printing presses in the 1960s, to Eileen Holton's careful keeping for 6 decades, and finally to a box opened for the first time in years. 9 copper plates, 1 novel, and a chain of human hands stretching back nearly a century.